30 minutes. Let's have this conversation going. Good morning, everybody. Wakey, wakey. It's time for Morning Glory. My name is MC Kalia, and I'll be your captain for the next 1 hour, 30 minutes. Let's have this conversation going. Good morning, everybody. Wakey, wakey. It's time for Morning Glory. My name is MC Kalia, and I'll be your captain for the next 1 hour, 30 minutes. Let's have this conversation going.
Karibu Topil Hospital, a brain and spine specialty hospital dedicated to providing extraordinary care through competent doctors and other medical personnel from premium institutes with knowledge on the latest and exceptional medical technologies. With a capacity of over 70 operational ward beds, over 30 specialists and consulting doctors, Topil Hospital is a modern level 5 facility equipped with 12 state-of-the-art ICU HDU beds and 2 modern HEPA filtered theaters with laminar airflow. Our aim is to provide comprehensive quality services at an affordable cost to the community, which includes but not limited to neurosurgery, radiology and diagnostics, MRI, CT scan, X-ray, ultrasound, endoscopy, ECG, EEG, pediatric cardiology, physiotherapy, orthopedics and trauma, pharmacy, laboratory, theater, ICU and HDU, obstetrics and gynecology, general surgery, maternity, psychology, psychiatry, comprehensive wellness checkup, dialysis and urology, oncology, dental care, ENT surgery, nutrition and dietetics. For ease of movement and transfer of patients, the hospital has 2 modern critical care ambulances equipped with ICU facilities and available 24 hours. Topil Hospital is located in a serene environment away from noise and has a cafeteria with fresh, nutritious foods, not forgetting ample parking for all clients. Topil Hospital is NHIF accredited and accepts medical covers from a number of insurance companies. If you're looking for the best customer care and patient experience and to be attended within the minimum waiting time possible, reach us through the website www.topilhospital.com or call 0782 121214, or you can also call 0782 900090. You can also email us through info@topilhospital.com. Topil Hospital, exceptional technology, extraordinary care.
Okay, of course, this is the Morning Glory Show, the 23rd day of August 2023. My name is MC Kalia, and this is the Morning Glory Show. We are coming in at 7:47 a.m., and we are glad to have you on this particular broadcast. Of course, we expect this particular morning to talk about our health. Being Wednesday, it is a healthy, wealthy, wise Wednesday on the Morning Glory Show. And if you just joined us, thank you so much for creating time to be with us this particular morning. For the last 2 days, we've been talking about Devolution Conference, but then we want to give it a break and also talk about our health. And at this particular moment, I would want to inform you that I'm with Dr. Mwadime from Topil Hospital. He is actually already in the room and is here to help us understand how to deal with hypertension and diabetes. And of course, he's given the specific type of diabetes. It's diabetes mellitus. Hope I'm saying it right. So all I need you to help me is just make sure that we reach as many people as possible, because as we were even having a conversation just before this particular show, the conversation was that we need to just be repeating these things as much as possible, because as much as we think that this thing is going down, some of these conditions are actually continue to be prevalent. For example, when you talk about diabetes, right now we are talking around 2.5%, but then according to World Health Organization, of course the statistics I'm giving are the statistics that were done around between 2019 and 2022 here in Kenya. It shows that a population of 2.5% to 3-point-something% are the ones who are suffering, or are the ones who are living with diabetes. Now, the shocking thing is that according to World Health Organization, this thing is not about to come down. In fact, they're predicting that by 2025, we'll be doing 4.29%. And the biggest question would be why. And so let me give Daktari a chance to say hi, then we get right into it. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Kalia. Good morning, our viewers. It's a pleasure to be back here again, to come and sit down with my friend Kalia, to just talk about the prevalent issues that are affecting our society today. And as you said rightly, diabetes and also hypertension is on the rise, despite the amount of knowledge that is out there concerning how to prevent such conditions, non-communicable diseases. But we're finding an increase in the number of these cases. And truthfully, as you said, in accordance to the WHO, we are having a prevalence of around 3.3% in the country right now. They're estimating that figure will go up by 2025 to around 4%, which can also even go higher than what the projected value was. This is because of the rise in the condition of COVID-19. We've seen what I can call a negative impact of COVID-19 in cases of diabetes, because there's been a rise in the number of people that have gotten newly diagnosed diabetic patients. So we do expect the figure can be higher than the 4% that the estimated figure was given pre-COVID condition, pre-COVID time as per se. So yeah, thank you for inviting me today.
Okay, thank you so much. And of course, even if we look at the statistics also with hypertension, it is not getting better. In fact, in the USA, it is estimated by also around the same time, half of the adult population, that's around 48.1%, will be suffering from hypertension. And of course, when you want to talk about these particular conditions, you also want to relate it with our population and look at the factors that are causing the rise in hypertension in those countries, and you just imagine that we're also in the pipeline, because there's nothing you're doing differently from what they're doing. And the biggest question this particular morning is, first of all, of course, let's start with diabetes. You've said we will talk about diabetes mellitus. What are the types of diabetes, and what distinguishes, or rather what distincts one type of diabetes from the other?
So the reason why I was talking about diabetes mellitus, it is the most common diabetes that we have in our society today. It is the one we usually mean when we talk about diabetes. There's another form of diabetes. It's called diabetes insipidus. It's mostly related to the excessive expansion of urination due to an hormonal imbalance in the body. Most of it is acquired, prior medication or post-surgical conditions, easily managed. But now the most prevalent form of diabetes that we have around is diabetes mellitus. Now, diabetes mellitus, or DM, and for the purpose of this show, we just call it as diabetes because it's the one that most people talk about, basically refers to a steady state of hyperglycemia in your body. Your body is not able to control its sugar level. And this can be caused by two things. It's either because you're not secreting the hormone that is responsible for controlling sugar in your body, which is insulin, or your cells are not sensitive to the response of insulin when it gives a command that you need to control your sugar, or you can have both. That basically means that's how diabetes comes about. So diabetes mellitus has 3 major types that I'm going to talk about. We have type 1 diabetes, we have type 2 diabetes, then we have the common one, the other one that we call gestational diabetes. Now, of the 3, type 2 diabetes is the most common kind of diabetes, taking a bigger chunk of it. More than 60% of individuals with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes has a prevalence of around 10% among people with diabetes, and then we have gestational diabetes that takes about 5%. So what do I mean by type 2 diabetes? And let me start with type 2 because of the prevalence. So type 2 diabetes basically occurs is what we call the age-related diabetes. With advanced age comes type 2 diabetes. And it is the most common one, and it's the one that we can easily modify because its risk factors are many. So type 2 diabetes happens because most of the times you don't have sensitivity to insulin. Most of the time you don't have sensitivity to insulin. Your cells are not sensitive to the response of insulin. So you have a consistent hyperglycemic. Hyperglycemic state just means a consistent rise in your sugar levels in blood. Now, type 1 diabetes is what we usually used to call it insulin-dependent diabetes before. Now, the type 1 diabetes is majorly because of autoimmune factors in our body. So what do I mean by autoimmune factors to our viewers? There is this state whereby your body just produces antibodies, which we use in our body to fight off diseases. But now you start producing antibodies that attack the pancreas cells. The pancreas is a small organ in your gastric system that is responsible for producing things like insulin and other hormones. So your body starts attacking the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. So by attacking them, it destroys them. So you lack insulin. And that's why it used to be called insulin-dependent diabetes. Because you're destroying the cells that produce insulin. So ideally, you fail to control your own sugar in the body. And the reason why the prevalence is lower is because the causative agent for that diabetes is mostly related to family history, whereby first-degree relatives. By first degree, I mean your brother, your sister, your father, your mother. So if you have a first-degree relative that has type 1 diabetes, you have a higher chance of getting type 1 diabetes because of the autoimmune nature of it. And the autoimmune factor is leaning towards genetics. Leading towards
Tuko pamoja. And once you have me, I believe you also have my viewers with you.
It's mostly because of the genetics of the issue. So and type 1 diabetes can occur at any age, but it's mostly seen in childhood and adolescence. But it mostly begins in childhood and adolescence, but can occur at any age because of the autoimmune factor I talked about. Now, type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, I talked about type 2.
You've talked about type 2.
Gestational diabetes, on the other hand, just like the name says, gestational diabetes is pregnancy-related diabetes. So we have individuals that develop diabetes during pregnancy. And a higher number of these individuals will end up having type 2 diabetes after getting the gestational diabetes. Because after you've delivered, you consistently have a hyperglycemic state. So you end up having diabetes. Yes.
Okay, and of course, you've talked about the 3 types within this particular type of diabetes. Of course, now it's like we have diabetes, then diabetes now, mellitus, then now we have 3 types within it. And of course, while mentioning them, you've also given the risk factors in each category. Maybe without now talking about each of them specifically, maybe let's also talk about the risk factors as a general, those that we can modify and those that we cannot.
Yeah, so generally for diabetes, the risk factors are quite a number, but we have age, advancing age as one of the risk factors of diabetes. So the older we get, the higher the risk we have of getting diabetes. We have genetics that play a role in diabetes, and mostly type 1 diabetes. Then we have lifestyle issues or the conditions, our way of lifestyle. So the risk factors in our way of lifestyle will be obesity, inactivity, physical inactivity. We have what we call alcohol intake, tobacco, smoking, and other factors. Now, when we talk about modifiable factors in diabetes, we talk about those factors that we can actually change. So the modifiable factors will be mostly linked towards the lifestyle issues. So alcohol intake, tobacco, smoking, physical inactivity, obesity plays a bigger role in getting type 2 diabetes. Now, these modifiable factors is what we want to concentrate on in the prevention of diabetes. One of the other risk factors that I might have forgotten about is rest. This comes into play probably in our setting. We are all affected because from data and research that has been done by WHO and American Association of Diabetes, they talk about a higher risk factor of having diabetes if you're of the African origin compared to white or Caucasian origin. Now, for us in Kenya, we are all, most of us are all African. So we are all playing into that risk factor. That's why I didn't even mention about it so much. But yes, rest can also be a distinctive factor in diabetes. So when we talk about the modifiable factors of diabetes and how we can prevent diabetes, because for these non-communicable diseases, usually for all diseases, prevention is usually better than cure, because most of the diseases are managed instead of being cured. We manage them, and diabetes falls in that category. So when you're talking about modifiable factors in diabetes, physical inactivity, you want to have physical exercise. And physical exercise necessarily just, we can boil it down to having exercise that burn out calories. Aerobics, for example. Jogging, for example. Running. Brisk walking. Not just walking, but brisk walking. Swimming. So these factors make you physically active. If it's walking, for example, you might decide, instead of me, probably you're living around within town and you're walking just a few kilometers away, probably 1 or 2 kilometers away. You decide in the morning or in the evening, instead of me taking a motorcycle, let me take a walk, brisk walking, because you're burning the calories. You don't necessarily, some people will say, I don't have money to go to the gym. But activities like walking, a jog in the morning, probably swimming, for those people who know how to swim, burn out calories, makes you physically active. And when you talk about physical activity increasing, then you risk reducing the risk of having obesity. So one activity takes out 2 modifiable factors. You're increasing your physical activity and you're reducing obesity, you're maintaining your body mass index. So in such a way, you're preventing the incidences of diabetes. And this plays a bigger role for modifiable factors for those people who have a genetic predisposition to getting diabetes. If you have a first-degree relative who has diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you're at a higher risk of getting the diabetes itself. But it does not mean that you'll get the diabetes. That's the beauty of it. For example, my father has type 2 diabetes or my mother has type 2 diabetes, it does not necessarily mean that I am bound to getting the diabetes, even though I'm at a higher risk of getting it. If I take care of my modifiable factors, I might live my life and age gracefully, as you stated out in your topic, without acquiring diabetes. But if you have a first-degree relative with diabetes and then you're not taking care of your modifiable factors, there's a higher chance you're going to end up with diabetes. So the other modifiable factor we talk about is alcohol intake. So alcohol and tobacco smoking. which increases the risk of having diabetes. Now, cutting down on this, on consumption of alcohol and cessation of tobacco smoking, reduces the risk so much of getting diabetes mellitus. Yes.
And of course, two things here. You know, when convincing someone about especially alcohol and maybe tobacco, the biggest question is they'll ask you is how. You know, because this is an addiction, of course, there's some bit of defense and all that. And the biggest question everyone asks is, inachangia aje? So if there's somebody who is asking themselves, why should they? And of course, we have even some patients who are actively on medication, but still would from time to time take alcohol. And how does alcohol and maybe tobacco use contribute to diabetes, or rather worsen diabetes?
So I might not get into the science of it all, but what you will notice when you dealing with patients with diabetes and they are taking alcohol and smoking cigarette, it becomes harder to even control their diabetes. You'll end up giving piles and piles of medication, combining 3-4 medications just to control diabetes. The risk factor, the alcohol intake increases cholesterol levels in your body, alcohol intake increases gastritis in your body. So alcohol in itself impairs the control of sugar in your body. And when people also take alcohol, they end up taking nyama choma with it, which increases also cholesterol levels in your body, which also increases your obesity status, increases your BMI. So it contributes
all the other modifiable factors.
Yeah. Now, cigarette smoking, because of its many what you call them, we used to call them carcinogenic factors that are found in tobacco smoking, have a negative impact on your cells that can contribute to the acquisition of diabetes. So when we do tell people to stop cigarette smoking, to stop alcohol intake, regulate their alcohol intake, it's because of the negative impact it has in your body and contributing to the acquisition of acquiring diabetes in itself. Some times back, we used to talk about acceptable values of taking alcohol, but generally now we just tell people just stop taking alcohol because of the risk it gives in having diabetes. Because if I tell you the acceptable values of taking alcohol, people will tell you take 1 unit per day for ladies, 2 units per day for men. Someone will tell me, let me accumulate all these units and take 7 units
them on Sunday.
So it's rather good to not have alcohol intake so that you can remove that risk factor. More so for people with a higher predisposition to getting a higher genetic predisposition to getting alcohol. You have your parents, both of them having diabetes. Probably you have an elder brother or sister having diabetes. So that means you're at an even higher risk of getting diabetes. So you tell you why risk it by increasing the modifiable factors. Why do you want to take alcohol? Why do you want to smoke? Why do you want to be physically inactive? Why do you want to deal with junk food when you're eating? That will increases, now will put the modifiable factors at a higher advantage. Then that means you'll probably end up having diabetes. Yes.
Of course, I was very keen when you talked about activities, and when you talked about swimming, you said for those who know, and I was just panning at my producer just to confirm that he doesn't he doesn't try something he doesn't know. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Morning Glory Show, Wednesday edition. It is the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise edition. With us in studio is Dr. Mwadime from Top Hill Hospital. He's here to help us understand how to manage diabetes and hypertension. And of course, just to remind you, is that Top Hill Hospital is a level 5 hospital located in Eldoret, Elgon View. That is just next to Boma Inn. So if you just around Eldoret and you ask anyone, I'm going to Top Hill, of course, chances are 90% of them will be knowing where Top Hill is. And the little 10% who may not know, just tell them I'm going to Boma Inn. The next to Boma Inn, that's where you'll find Top Hill Hospital. It is a hospital with all that you need when it comes to your medical attention. So anytime you have an insurance and you're thinking of a place where you can get a maximum care, then consider Top Hill Hospital as one of those places you'd want to go. Of course, their mantra is always exceptional technology, extraordinary care. And wherever there is technology, just like Waswahili usema, palipo na wazee hapaharibiki jambo, then palipo na technology pia, chances are high that you'll get healed. So make sure that you visit Topil Hospital, and you don't wait until you're sick. You can just even visit the hospital just to understand how it works. So Topil Hospital has an open door policy. You can walk in there and of course engage those who are there, the customer service, and make sure that you understand what services they offer. If you're looking for a good brain and spine hospital, that is the place to get it. But then also remember, they have all the other clinical departments. Also, we are coming live from Dawi Afrique Photography. Dawi Afrique Photography is a production house. Of course, part of our services is live streaming, just like the one that you're getting us through. We also do a lot of ceremonies. If you need somebody who can document your work, then consider working with Dawi Afrique Photography. Now, Daktari, moving on, of course, you've talked about cigarettes, we've talked about the factors we can modify and those that we cannot modify. I know food is one that we can modify. But I know that just like alcohol, you really need to convince people that there's a way we need to eat when we are diabetic. Of course, you've talked about obesity. Beyond obesity, is there any other relationship between food and diabetes?
Beyond obesity, most of the time, the higher prevalence will be food with obesity, is because of how much the kind of foods that we take. So there's a very high connection between food and obesity. There are genetic factors whereby you're having a family member, your family is predisposed to having diabetes or obesity, so you have a higher chance of standing to get obesity. But when you control the nutrition bit, there's a higher chance of controlling obesity. So the connection between food and obesity is very high. The genetic component might be very little, but the connection between food and obesity is very high. So taking care of your nutrition is very important when you're taking, when you're doing your meals. You hear nutritionists or dietetics talking, encouraging people to take less fat, less carbohydrates, do more minerals and vegetables, do more fruits, do less red meat, take more of white meat. It all depends on the cholesterol figures that are found in red meat as compared to white meat. When they talk about saturated and unsaturated fats, when you're talking about fats in simpler terms, avoid the solids, take the liquids. The clearer the liquid, the less the cholesterol levels in it, in the fat that you're taking. Use less fat when you're cooking your food, because it increases the fat saturations in your blood, increasing the cholesterol levels in your blood, increasing the bad lipids in your blood, increasing the risk of getting obesity. So it's all a stepwise connection factor. So food at the base of the pyramid contributes highly to obesity in your body. The genetic component, though they are very minimal, and it's something you can actually control. So it does not mean that some people will say, in my family we are obese. That is not a curse for you. That's the thing. It's not a curse. Yes, you might say, in my family we are mostly obese. That means you're predisposing to getting obesity. But you can actively control so that you do not get to obesity. So that you do not get to obesity by increasing physical activity and regulating the kind of food that you actually take. Yes.
Okay. And just close to that, of course, is now the fact that diabetes inaitwa ugonjwa wa sukari kwa Kiswahili, and people would be like, is there a relationship between it and sugar? Direct relationship.
Sugar is a carbohydrate. If you remember from our basic science in school, it was called monohydrate, if I'm not monosaccharide, if I'm not wrong, sorry for that. It's called a monosaccharide. Sugar is a carbohydrate in itself, providing the monosaccharide. Disaccharide then broken down to glucose, which is a monosaccharide, and it's the glucose that is linked to diabetes. But does it mean that you should not take sugar per se? Does it mean taking a lot of sugar predisposing you to getting diabetes? There is a connection in that, but people usually forget is that someone will say, me, I don't take tea with sugar, but I find you taking junk food and cake. So people forget that factor. Mtu anasema, mimi nikikunywa chai yangu siweki sukari. Na natumia chai bila sukari, mimi si mtu wa sukari, kwa hivyo sidhani kama nitapata ugonjwa wa sukari. Hivyo ndo watu wengi hupenda kusema. But we forget that we can get sugar from even other sources, because just like your basic science, from monosaccharide, disaccharide, as the levels go up, you can still get sugar from basic carbohydrates. So you're saying, I'm not going to take tea in my sugar, but I'm going to take junk food, which is chips, cakes, soda. They all contain sugar, and it's all going to be broken down into glucose. So it will still increase your glucose levels in blood. So it still gives you an increased chance of getting diabetes. It is good you're trying to take tea without sugar, but also consider the other carbohydrates, not necessarily the disaccharides. Try consider the other carbohydrates, which if you talk to nutritionists and dietetics, they will tell you reduce your carbohydrate intake. They will not tell you reduce your sugar intake. They will tell you reduce your carbohydrate because they have covered sugar in that. So it is very important to reduce your carbohydrate intake, more so with advancing age. Why? Because you're less active when you're older. Teenagers and young people grow. So if you probably take for a young child, the amount of carbohydrate they consume, they will probably burn it out. They play in school, they run around, they are always physically active. Same to teenagers who have that we call a growth spurt, whereby they are growing. So whatever carbohydrates and whatever proteins they're taking, they are not piling it up, they're using it up. Now, if you are advanced in age, you're 45 years and older, you probably need less carbohydrate in your body, and probably need more vegetables and fruits in your diet. So that's why we tell you reduce your carbohydrate intake, probably increase the intake of fruits and vegetables. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. And just also, I think my questions this morning are just around the things that people say outside there. Of course, when we talk about any condition, then you'd want to also talk about the signs and the symptoms. And diabetes, of course, as you said, may not actually be healed. It will only be managed. But then now, at the entry point, are there any visible signs that will show me that I'm now maybe a diabetic patient?
Yes. For the signs and symptoms, I will first of all concentrate on the type 2 diabetes, whereby we have a classical sign that we talk about. When you come to hospital, the doctor will ask you, do you drink a lot of water, more than you used to? Do you urinate a lot, mostly at night? How many times do you wake up in the night just to go and urinate? And how much food intake are you taking? Are you always hungry? So they usually call it polydipsia, polyuria. You're eating a lot. They usually talks about it in the 3 Ps. So those are some of the signs and symptoms of having diabetes. So someone is always thirsty. Someone goes to the toilet a lot to urinate. Someone is always hungry. It's mostly associated with type 2 diabetes. Then the other symptoms will come in with the complications of diabetes. So someone will tell you, I have tingling sensation in my leg, or I have burning sensation in my leg that is constant. I feel like my vision is becoming blurry every time. So some of the factors, some of those complications that we see with diabetes. Someone comes, I've seen patients coming to me telling me I have constant diarrhea that doesn't seem to go away, which is associated with the complications of diabetes. But the classical signs. Then someone tells you, I'm always tired. I feel tired all the time. I go to hospital, wanapima damu, they say I don't have an infection, but I usually feel tired all the time. Then you check their sugar levels, quite high. Yes. So some of those common symptoms that we see in diabetes, but the classical ones you see, someone tells you, I drink a lot of water. Even at night, I just wake up and just want to drink water. I'm always thirsty. Someone will also tell you, I urinate a lot. Always, even in the night, I wake up to go and urinate. Ideally, if you're an adult, you're supposed to sleep through the night and probably wake up in the morning, then urinate. When someone tells you, I wake up like 3 to 4 times just in the night to go and urinate. If you see those signs, it's very good to go and check your sugar levels in hospital because of the increased risk of having diabetes itself. Yes.
Of course, thank you so much for those who tuned in. This is the Morning Glory Show. Let me read some of the few feedback and comments that we're getting. Nathaniel Mwadime, now you'll have to explain this. Watching from Kilifi as I'm going to work. Then there's Kiprotich. Brengwe says watching from Nand Hills. Show iko fire. Then Nancy Saniego says she's following. Ambassador Alfred Sargent all the way from Australia says a great session. Thank you so much. Honorable Yano Lejean says he's watching. Thank you so much. Of course, for creating time always to be with us on the Morning Glory Show. And if you have any questions, this is the time to ask those particular questions. And one of the questions that comes in here is the relationship between diabetes na kidonda kutopona. Now, that one somebody ameiweka hivyo venye nimeuliza. Is there any relationship and how does it work?
Again, without going into the science of it, but there's a big relationship between diabetes and what we call, vidondas kutopona, they used to call them diabetic ulcers. Because an increased state of sugar levels in your blood perpetuates, growth of bacteria around the wound. Secondly, it also has microvascular, how can I put it in a way? In a simpler term, increased sugar state in your body makes it, this leads to poor supply of blood to the area that has the ulcer, because the small blood vessels are destroyed because of a high sugar state. Now, when you're having poor blood supply to that area that is with the ulcer, then it creates a good environment for bacteria to go, because antibiotics don't get there efficiently. So that state of increased sugar in your body, in your blood, makes the environment conducive for bacteria to grow. Secondly, poor supply of that ulcer, of that wound with blood because of diabetes, makes it harder for antibiotics to get there. Then you have a thriving environment for the wound not to heal. So that is some of the major factors that contributes to having an unhealing ulcer in people with diabetes, and that is what contributes to diabetic ulcer. And truth as the viewers asked, it is usually very hard to treat a diabetic ulcer because they heal very slowly. And sometimes you'll notice that for those relatives or for those viewers that have relatives that have diabetic ulcers, you've found yourself going to hospital, then the doctor tells you, now we might need to cut off this leg. Most diabetic ulcers are found on the foot. We call them diabetic foot. So the doctor tells you, now we may need to cut off this leg because this wound is not healing. It is causing constant infection in your body. So we need to cut it off. The reason being that. So it's usually very hard to treat diabetic ulcers. So some of those complications that we found in diabetes. And most of the time, it's because of poor sugar control. I think we'll probably talk about it for the people that are living with diabetes. We've been talking about the people that don't have diabetes and are getting the higher risk of having diabetes. Then there's those people who are living with diabetes. Now, just to divulge into it a little bit of it.
But of course, it's a topic that will still come.
Yes, just a little bit of it is just as I talk about modifiable factors that prevent diabetes, lead to the prevention of diabetes. Now, for people living with diabetes, these modifiable factors, has a higher increases. It makes sugar control in your body to be impaired. So if you're obese, you're taking alcohol, you're cigarette smoking, physical inactivity, and you're living with diabetes, the sugar control in your body becomes so impaired. So you'll find the doctor having to add so many drugs just to control your diabetes. But if you modify these factors, you become physical active, you reduce junk food, do away with alcohol intake, do away with cigarette smoking. When you control these modifiable factors and take a good hold of them, your sugar control becomes very easy. And now this is where the bigger part plays a role. Why? Because if you end up having a diabetic ulcer, or if you end up having a wound on your foot, but you have very good sugar control, we call it glycemic control. When you have very sugar control in your body, the high chances of this wound, the chances of this wound healing becomes very high. So for people living with diabetics, these modifiable factors play a bigger role. Just like for the people that don't have diabetes, if you have diabetes and you take care of the risk factors that lead to diabetes that we can actually modify, it becomes very easy to control your sugar. And you'll notice that when you have your BMI is low, you're physically active, you don't take alcohol, you don't smoke cigarette, then we end up using probably 1 or 2 drugs to control diabetes. And it becomes very good because the complications of diabetes will not set in you, or will take delayed time to actually set in your body. Yes.
Of course, as he puts it, living with diabetes is a whole topic that maybe we'll need to have it next, and that's time now to even tag people who actively have diabetes, and maybe that time we'll also rope in a nutritionist and look at how can we now prolong life despite the fact that somebody could already be having diabetes. And Daktari, now let's move forward. I think you'd still guide me, but then I have a feeling that we've talked about diabetes. It's quite understood. Let's now move into hypertension, then relate the two.
Now, hypertension or high blood pressure, just by the way, in simpler terms, the way the term defines itself, is a persistent elevated blood pressure in your body. The normal blood pressure is, if for those who you have ever visited a hospital facility, when you go to the triaging area, you'd find that they use the blood pressure machine, then they write something, X over Y. So the X on top is we call it the systolic pressure. The Y at the bottom is the diastolic pressure. Now, the systolic pressure, the normal ranges will be between 122 to 140. Okay, we can classically say less than 140. And then the diastolic pressures will be between 62 to 90 millimeters of mercury. This normal blood pressure is sufficient to perfuse your body so that blood can get to the areas that it needs to get and actually perfuse the cells and keep you healthy. Now, hypertension just means a persistently elevated blood pressure of more than 140 over 90. Now, hypertension in itself, just as you had talked about earlier, has a higher prevalence in Kenya than diabetes, whereby the figures that they are throwing around are between 12.3 to up to 33% of individuals that are living with hypertension. So you can see the higher individuals that are actually having hypertension. So, and this figure is expected to rise, just like with diabetes. Yeah. This figure is also expected to rise. Now, the risk factors of hypertension, just like the one with diabetes, because of these two conditions tend to go hand in hand for most individuals, and the risk factors tend to borrow from each other, with lack of a better word. They tend to borrow from each other. So the risk factors of hypertension will just play the same way. You have advanced age, you have genetics which plays a role in hypertension. We have race, and unfortunately the African race falls into a higher play for that. We have the African race that plays a higher predisposition to getting hypertension. And then we have now the modifiable factors that we talk about: obesity, physical inactivity, alcohol intake, cigarette smoking, that plays a bigger role in having development of hypertension. Yes.
Okay, so that means that actually, basically, these two are quite related. Okay.
There's a big relationship between the two things. Yes.
And that now takes us also to the connection now between the two, because of course I know it lies in the risk factors, as you've put it, but then maybe using a more simple language, why is it that the people who have diabetes are also having hypertension beyond what appears in the surface?
There's a data that was floated around that about double the people that have diabetes will develop. You have a double chance of developing hypertension if you're having diabetes. Now, this link tells you the high connection between the two conditions. And the reason being that most of as I talked about earlier, one, the modifiable factors or the risk factors that lead to the development of diabetes also lead to the development of hypertension. So if you don't take care of both of these risk factors, the physical inactivity, the obesity, alcohol intake, tobacco smoking, if you don't take care of these risk factors, you'll end up getting both conditions. You end up getting diabetes, and at the same time you end up getting hypertension. So because of this connection, this high linkage in the risk factors, the high linkage because of these risk factors that actually affect diabetes, that's why you find that there's a higher chance of you having both conditions or both diseases. So that's where the biggest connection comes into play. And secondly, when you're, for example, advancing in age, as you advance in age and we grow older, our systems too do grow older. And one of those systems is the vascular system, which is the blood vessel system. So the blood vessel becomes less elastic, so your heart has to pump harder to be able to generate more power, to be able to go against this resistance. So you have advancing age as a higher factor for acquiring hypertension. But the connection might, the percentage will be lower, because now the modifiable factors play a key role. I'm sure you found you're walking around probably in the street, unfortunately probably in the leafy suburbs, you find people jogging in the morning. You find an elderly person, probably ukimwangalia, gray hair, looks like he's in the 50s or 60s, but he's taking a jog in the morning. Why? This helps this individual to be able to control these non-communicable diseases, which high on the list is hypertension and diabetes. So for the general public out there, the connection between the two will be mostly linked to the risk factors that are associated with it, because most of the risk factors of diabetes are also the risk factors of hypertension. So if you end up getting diabetes, you'll end up getting hypertension, and vice versa, because of these risk factors that we have. And that is why when I was talking about earlier in the lifestyle and living with diabetes, same way as living with hypertension, if you modify your risk factors, if you can take care of the risk factors that can actually be modified, if you have diabetes, you'll reduce the chances of having hypertension. If you have hypertension, you reduce the chances of getting diabetes, because you've taken care of those risk factors. But if you just lie down and leave it to medications, you'll end up getting the other condition. Yes.
And just to maybe understand it better, let's talk about hypertension alone. Let's say, of course, it is a condition. Is there any family linkages with hypertension without diabetes?
Yes, there are those, just as I talk about the risk factors, genetics being one of them, and rest also being one of them. Now, because of the genetic predisposition of getting hypertension, there is a connection between getting a family connection of hypertensive individuals, more so in the first degree relatives. I might not give you the percentage per se, but more so in the first degree relative. The first degree that your parents, your siblings. So if any of them has diabetes, or if both your parents have, if both your parents have hypertension, or any of them has hypertension, there's a higher risk of you getting hypertension. Now the beauty of this is, just like its relative diabetes, is that when you are having a higher risk, fast family connection of hypertension, and you modify you take care of the risk factors that can actually be modified, it does not necessarily mean you'll end up having hypertension. There are people out there who are living without hypertension, and yet their parents or their siblings have hypertension. Yes.
Okay, and what challenges do patients who have both hypertension and diabetes simultaneously face, different from maybe one that has one of the two?
Now, the first challenge will be what we call pill burden. These conditions are treated with medications, controlled with medications. So when you're having both conditions, that means I will have to, when you come to hospital, I'll have to give you medications for diabetes, and I have to give you medication for hypertension. And the unlucky bit is if you have what we call poorly controlled diabetes and poorly controlled hypertension, whereby now I have to use so many drugs just to control the two conditions that you actually have. So the first challenge that these people face is, one, pill burden and the stress it brings. Imagine you're taking just up to 5 or 6 different types of drugs to control both conditions. The amount of burden that you have. And this comes into play in the management of this condition, because if you're having a higher pill burden, you're taking more pills just to control the two conditions, most of these individuals, we have a higher percentage of these individuals, just not to use the word most, we have a higher percentage of these individuals who default on medications. Simply to put, unachoka. Just simply to put, unachoka. Mbona nachukua hizi dawa zote? So unapata mtu anaamua wacha niruke moja, acha niruke siku moja, acha nipunguze hii maana naona ni kama pressure yangu imeanza kuwa sawa, wacha nipunguze hii maana naona kama sukari yangu imeanza kuwa sawa, because of the pill burden that these people face. Now the second, coming back to your question, the second burden that these people have, or the complication that these people have because of having both diseases, is what we call the risk of having the complications of these diseases. Now, there are very many complications of having diabetes and hypertension. We can have them as vascular complications. You can have heart conditions. You can have things like stroke. So if you're having both diabetes and hypertension, you're at a higher risk of getting stroke. Stroke, that's the common one that we talk about, stroke. If you're having both diabetes and hypertension, compared to someone with diabetes or with hypertension, you're at a higher risk of getting heart diseases, heart conditions. So you're having heart failure, you're having heart attacks. If you're having both diabetes and hypertension, you're at a higher risk of having kidney failure and all the other conditions that fall in its place. So the complications of these two conditions, if you're having both, you're at a higher risk of getting them than someone who has either of the two. Yes.
Okay. And many a times, of course, the worst that can happen in any condition is death.
Yeah, I intentionally avoided to talk that because of the gloom and doom that comes with the word death.
Of course, I'm framing. Of course, let's frame the next question.
But if you're having increased complications of all these two conditions, then you're at a higher risk of dying young. Let's say dying young. And by young here, I mean probably in your 60s, 70s, and your people living to 90s and 100s. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, now let's talk a little bit of positivity. Of course, let's talk about success stories and how they look like. Of course, we may not mention any patients, but then how does a success story with someone suffering from these conditions look like?
Now this is where you'll have this. Fortunately, let me use the word fortunately. Fortunately for the people that I see, the patients that I see that are diagnosed for the first time with hypertension or diabetes, the first question they ask you is, daktari nitaacha kukunywa dawa? The second question they ask you, na daktari mbona sitaki kuanza dawa mapema maana mwili yangu itazoea. Thirdly, someone will ask you, daktari, can I do without the drugs and probably just modify my lifestyle and see whether I'm going to control all this? So many people have many questions when it comes to diabetes and hypertension because of we have seen people, we have met people, we live with people that have these conditions. We see how they struggle. So many people are afraid of getting into medication. All I can say is the success story about it is if you have good control of your either condition, whether be it diabetes or hypertension, and you have very good control to the point that you end up using one medication just to control your condition and you're living very well with it. You have good success stories of people taking their medication, living to advanced age without getting the complications of diabetes. I know the next question you're going to ask me, is there a point whereby you can stop taking these medications?
Because it's not even my question, it's a question that has come in. Yes. Does it mean that once I start using medication for no, in fact, they said hypertension specifically, does it mean there's a time I can stop?
Now, there are very few instances whereby your doctor will stop the medication. If you're lucky enough, probably you were given medication for hypertension because of, for example, someone in pain. There are some factors like pain that contribute to increasing blood pressure. There are other diseases like thyroid diseases because of production of thyroid hormones that can trigger hypertension. And then when you control these conditions, your blood pressure stabilizes to the point that I stop. I have seen patients who come with, for example, back issues. They have been having constant back pain for a very long time. So they go to dispensaries or peripheral facilities. Apart from being given painkiller and for management, you notice that their blood pressure is very high. Then you give them medication for hypertension. Then when you come and do the the spinal surgery or the spinal correction, the pain goes away and reduces significantly, then their pressure also takes care of itself, to the point that now I am forced to stop the medication, because now with the medication, their pressures are going extremely low. Now, those are the people you'll find most of the time that will tell you, I had pressure and I stopped taking pressure medications because my pressure became normal. Most of the time it's because they had another health condition that contributed, for example, to hypertension. Let me talk about hypertension because of the question that was asked. They had a health condition that contributed to the hypertension. So when you take care of that health condition, subsequently you've taken care of their hypertension. Then the point that unaanza kupunguza dawa paka they stop. Now, not everyone is like that, and probably it's a very small percentage of people that is like that. If you end up getting hypertension without a trigger of any other health condition, and you develop hypertension, we start you on medications. We don't encourage you to stop your medications on your own. Why? Because of the complications that come with hypertension. Persistently high blood pressure increases the risk of having stroke. Persistently high blood pressure increases the risk of having a heart attack or heart conditions. And if you develop primary hypertension or essential hypertension, not because of any other medical condition, but because you've developed hypertension, that means your body's ability to control its blood pressure is impaired. Now, what I tell the patients and what I would like to advise viewers out there, if you have primary hypertension, meaning your ability to control blood pressure is impaired, that daktari has given you is what is controlling your pressure. The good news is if you control your modifiable factors, take care of obesity, be physically active, cigarette smoking, alcohol intake, junk food intake, reduction in cholesterol intake. If you modify all that to the point that now we can only use one drug just to control your pressure, we'll be able to reduce your pill burden. And at the long run, you reduce the complications of having hypertension. If you stop taking your medication on your own because you think your pressure is okay, someone will come and tell me, Daktari, I was dealing with pressures of 200 plus millimeters of mercury. Now I'm at 160. I feel like I'm good to go. Maybe I want to stop this. The risk of having a complication of hypertension is very high. You might end up having a stroke. Probably something anxious happens to you. You get anxious, you end up having a stroke. So the risk of having it is very high. So you want to put you on medications. There are certain points or certain ages where when you become advanced in your ages, probably 70 or 80s, and taking the medication makes you hypotensive, now you can probably stop the medication. But it's a question that I don't really like, how can I put it? You don't want to tell someone that take this medication for a month, then you stop. Take this medication for 2 months, then you stop.
And of course, there's a rejoinder question that comes to my WhatsApp. Somebody says that they've been taking the drugs for some time. Okay, I went to the hospital. I was told I need to take drugs for hypertension. And then I took them. Then I've been checking my pressure consistently. And they've consistently recorded a normal pressure. I don't know consistently means how long, but what does that point out?
That points out to the good functionality of the drug. You'll notice that most of the time...
So you see this person now, he has stopped, that means that the drug could be functioning well. So it's not that the pressure has gone away.
Yeah, it just means the drug is functioning very well. And I encourage that individual to just take his medication and constantly check his pressures and constantly go to clinic. Why? Because it means your drug is working very well. And when your drug is working very well, if you're probably taking 2 or 3 drugs, it gives the physician, the doctor that is checking up on you in the clinic, a leeway to be able to adjust your medications and probably reduce your pill burden. That's the thing. It helps me be able to reduce your pill burden because now I know your control is very good. Then I'll talk about, then you sit down with a nutritionist, talks about your diet, get satisfied with your diet. Talk about physical activity. If you were taking alcohol, you've stopped. These risk factors, you've reduced them. Then it gives the doctor an ability to reduce your pill burden. You'll notice that the only time the doctor probably might stop your medication is if you have now persistently low pressures. Now, when you're having persistently low pressure, that means he has a leeway of stopping your medication and observing you over time. So most people will want, the mistake that most people actually do is that they stop the drugs on their own without visiting the doctor. And then you end up presenting in an emergency setting, probably with a stroke. Then the first question the doctor will ask you, are you diabetic or are you hypertensive? Then the patient will say, nilikuanga nayo nikatumia dawa alafu nikaacha, ilikuwa normal. So you see, you end up having the complication in something you could have actually prevented. Yes.
Okay, and of course there's an assertive one here who says, I stopped the alcohol and stop the medication. Anyway, of course, it's a question that we'll answer forever. So,
yes. So my encouragement to people living with hypertension, because this one will affect mostly the individuals that are actually living with these conditions, hypertension and diabetes. It's very good to have your clinic reviews, be followed up, so that we can approach this thing in a case-to-case basis. Because for these conditions, you don't want to throw out a blanket out there. That you've stopped taking alcohol, now you can stop taking your diabetic medication. No, we want to deal with it on a case-to-case basis, and that becomes easier when you're being followed up in a clinic setup, in a hospital facility with your physician, because he'll deal with you in your case. You've modified your factors, you're getting better, your medications are working appropriately. Now, can I be able to reduce the dosages that I'm giving you? And the doctor will be able to follow up the response as he reduces the doses that you're giving. So dealing with it on a case-to-case basis becomes very easy. So my encouragement out there, please don't stop. Visit your doctor first. Let them take a look at you. Let them advise you in accordance to how you are yourself. Yes.
Okay. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I would want to rest that there, because of course, and funny thing, you realize that these are my friends, so they'll come to the so now ajua sana. So and of course, now moving forward, and just now talking generally about the two conditions, and I would start with the response in hospital when someone is told they have either diabetes or hypertension or both. How many people have knowledge about this? In your own experience as a doctor, do you feel we are doing well when it comes to management of these two diseases, or there's still something that we need to do?
I can say we are not doing badly. The knowledge is out there, and that's why we keep on having reminders. The knowledge is out there. Most individuals that I have seen and newly diagnosed them with either diabetes or hypertension have a knowledge about the disease, and that's why they keep on asking you those questions. Am I ever going to stop the drugs? Dr. Why do you want to start me early right now? And probably, can I start with diet? So that means that person actually knows about the risk factors. Dr. Can I start with diet? And, can I do conservative management? Can I just probably be physically active, start with my diet? Can you monitor me from some time before you start me on the medication? These kind of questions that an individual asks you in a clinic setup when they come to you for the first time, gives you an idea. It gives you an idea of how much information that has gotten out to the public. So what I can say, more so in the urban setting, because of the penetration of media and awareness programs, most individuals know about more so diabetes and hypertension. Most individuals have a knowledge about this condition, and most individuals know exactly how to prevent it. What I can say is probably the laxity that comes into place. People become less and less interested in taking care of their modifiable factors. For example, you know that I'm advancing in age and junk food is not good for my body, but someone will just want to take junk food. That behavior of not wanting to follow these steps is what people have, not necessarily not having the knowledge about it, because most individuals will know about 3 to 4 risk factors of diabetes and how they can actually prevent this condition. And even for the family connection with diabetes, most individuals will know about it. Because as I talked about the first degree relative, most people will know if both parents have diabetes. You will probably know if you have siblings that have diabetes. And for these individuals, if you meet them for the first time in hospital, the first thing they'll tell you, if you, for example, you're diagnosing someone with diabetes for the first time, then they'll tell you, then they will tell you, Daktari, my parents also have diabetes. I think ama mwingine atakwambia nilikuwa na suspect. Unajua wazazi wangu wanakuanga na diabetes. So this tells you that this person actually knows about diabetes and knows that genetics is a risk factor for diabetes. And so the awareness out there will be, let's take care of the modifiable risk factors, because these are the things that we can actually control. Yes, I am having a family member, a first degree relative with diabetes, so I'm a higher chance of having diabetes. But what can I control so that I don't get to that point? Because as I said, it doesn't mean that you're going to end up with diabetes if both your parents have diabetes. You can actually live healthy and avoid that route of diabetes. Yes.
And just as we also come to almost the tail part, let's talk about the challenges that as a doctor you feel can be modified now by the environments that these people stay in, to make sure that people who have diabetes also have a good environment to, of course, manage it.
So we start with the ones that don't have diabetes. Now, I think the ignorance part of it is being dealt with quite satisfactory, if I might say. Or we are getting there to the satisfactory bit. Knowledge is getting out there. So my biggest challenge with the people that don't have diabetes is kindly follow the instructions. More so if you know you are at a higher predisposition because of your family link-up. Kindly follow up the routine. Keep healthy, keep fit, don't take alcohol, don't smoke, reduce this modifiable risk factor so that you don't end up having diabetes. Because this is something that is in your hands, you can actually control. Now, the other challenges that people now living with diabetes, what can we do about it? Now, for the people living with diabetes, the message will still be the same. Go to your clinic visits. Have a clinic follow-up with your physician. Monitor your blood pressure or your sugars constantly. Take your medications well. Have a sit down with your nutritionist. Let them look at your diet. Have a sit down with, do your physical activities and physical exercises. In the end run, developing the complications of these two conditions will become minimal. So the biggest challenge I usually find with people living with diabetes is the laxity that people have. Whereby you're saying, just because I'm taking medications, probably I don't need to disturb my mind with all these other things. Why do you want me to go jogging and I'm also taking my medications? Why do you want to restrict me to this diet and you're denying me the luxuries of life? So the biggest challenge you have with people actually living in this condition is defiance. That's the word I was thinking about. They're looking for defiance. People just want to live their life the way they are without taking care of anything. So when you do that, it becomes a challenge to control your condition, because you find these patients that have, when you talk about poorly controlled or not easy to manage diabetes, they are persistently high sugars despite being on 3 or 4 medications. So you're forced to modify some of those medications just to control their sugar. And these are the individuals that will end up having a higher risk of having these complications of either diabetes or hypertension. Yes.
Thank you so much for that, Daktari. And of course, this is a topic that we may not exhaust today. Next time we'll talk about now the people living with diabetes, and of course now managing diabetes once you already have it, and the things you need to do, what you don't need to do, and all that in our next segment. But then this particular time I would want to give you a chance to give your parting shot.
So my parting shot for the community out there will be, prevention is usually better than cure. So for people that don't have diabetes, it is high chance that we take a bigger step and a bigger role in the prevention of getting these diseases. As we had started earlier, when you were throwing out the figures, 3.3 for around 4%. You expect that figure to rise to more than 4.5% by 2025. Why don't you take the initiative and try and prevent these conditions? Because most of these factors we can actually modify. So why don't you take an initiative to try and prevent these conditions? And by prevention, we reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases, more so diabetes and hypertension in our society. So it is very important to take care of, to live healthy. That's what I'm going to say. Now, for the people living with diabetes, clinic follow-up, taking your medications is very important, because most people that are living with these conditions, either diabetes or hypertension, you tend to be laxity on your clinic follow-ups. You just take your medications and probably you've not even gone to clinic for a whole year plus. You have to understand that you have a medical condition. You have a disease. And anyone with a disease needs follow-up by their primary doctor or their physician. So it's very important to have follow-up, because when you have follow-up, you can know the progress of your disease and you can know how well to tackle it. If your pressure or sugar control is getting better, it's a thumbs up. It makes the doctor modify your medication. If it's getting bad, it makes the doctor be able to tackle the issue earlier before you develop these complications, because you don't want to walk into hospital after a long time without being there with already a complication. Because living with these complications, more so things like stroke or heart conditions or kidney failure, it takes a toll on your body, reduces your life expectancy. So we want the people to living with these conditions that you live with them but not die because of them. Yes.
Okay, you live with them but not die because of them. And of course, that is exactly why you need to be here every Wednesday for your health education. But then, of course, beyond that, we are here from Monday to Friday, what other people would call every weekday, from 7:30 to 9 a.m. just to make sure that you get insightful guests giving you insightful information for the purpose of making sure that you improve the quality of life that you live. Of course, Dr. Madima comes from Top Hill Hospital. It is a level 5 hospital, as I mentioned earlier, situated in Elgon View. If you have an insurance, make sure that it is reading Top Hill Hospital, because that is where you get exceptional technology, giving you extraordinary care, and also some well-dedicated medics to make sure that also your health is well taken care of. Of course, many times when you hear Dr. speaking, you would say your primary doctor, so make sure that your primary doctor comes from Top Hill Hospital. Now, as a parting shot, remember that your health is a journey, or rather a story that you are the only person who can write. Embrace the knowledge, make informed decision, pave way for a vibrant life. Together we can conquer diabetes and hypertension. Stay well and stay empowered. That is the parting shot this particular morning. And tomorrow we shall still be talking about Evolution Conference. We'll go back to talking about Evolution Conference, and we'd want to now look at those who are actively involved in planning, those who are actively involved in receiving the guests, and ask ourselves, did it make any impact economically, socially, or otherwise to the people of Uasin Gishu County? That will be the hot topic tomorrow. With that, thank you so much for creating time to be with us on the Morning Glory Show.